Greetings. Welcome to the Scrum, Politico's weekly podcast. I'm Reed Epstein from the White House team here in the Politico newsroom. We're talking this week about the only two big topics in Washington, Obamacare and the government shutdown, which largely stems from Obamacare. For all of that, we have our great team of Politicos. We have White House reporter Carrie Budoff-Brown, my neighbor on Capitol Hill, politics reporter Alex Eisenstadt, who's just arriving now, and David Nather, who knows more about Obamacare and literally wrote the book about it than anyone else in town. Before we dig into these topics, let's get your headlines of the week. Carrie, why don't you go ahead first?
I mean, it has to be like the intransigence, both sides on the budget impasse and the shutdown, the fact that, they're 4 days in and there's been absolutely no movement and no sign of movement anytime soon.
David?
And for us in healthcare land, it's the launch of Obamacare enrollment. It started on October 1st. There's 6 months to enroll, but it's kind of glitchy right now. The federal website that handles sign up for about 36 states is, it crashes, it gives people error messages, it hangs up, all this kind of stuff. So they're gonna have to get it fixed pretty soon.
Alex?
Big story in politics news is that we had a very stable 2014 political landscape until just this last week, and the shutdown has really changed that just to a great extent.
We'll move into our first big theme. As we know, the government is shut down. The president canceled his Asia trip. The White House said Friday that, among other calamities, the people who enforce the economic sanctions against Iran are out. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers are furloughed. Programs like Head Start are on hold. As Carrie wrote, White House Press Secretary Jake Carney has to gasp, answer his own telephone. National parks and monuments.
You probably still won't get them.
National parks and monuments are closed. A playground, a swing set in the park near where Carrie and I live is closed. And
Capitol Hill's in an uproar.
There's a toddler riot coming.
Because of all the National Park Service playgrounds on the Hill. That's all there really is. And they're all closed, padlocked, though people have broken in. It just shows you how impacted people are.
And because of the bias against children, it hasn't gotten nearly the coverage of the World War II veterans storming the gates at the World War II memorial.
By the end of this, we may rival it.
We need to get some vines up of the children coming through. The president insists the shutdown could be ended in minutes if the House were to pass a clean CR that doesn't touch Obamacare. House Republicans' conservative wing, as Alex wrote this week, has very little incentive to cooperate with anything along that lines. So how does this end? Is a grand bargain coming back? Are we going to wait? Are we going to be back here in a week or 2 weeks having the same discussion about the shutdown that we're having now?
I believe that we will. I don't, at this point in time, I don't think anybody expects any movement, certainly not over the weekend, not into next week. Boehner seems to be holding firm on and holding his members together, even the moderates who are saying the shutdown should end. And it seems at this point that the only backstop is the debt limit deadline, which is October 17th. And there is talk, like you said, of sort of combining things. It may not be a grand bargain, it may be a mini bargain. That's kind of the word that people are talking about. But that will be similarly difficult to try to do, and the president and Democrats have made clear that they're not going to get into some sort of protracted negotiation over a grand bargain or mini bargain while leaving the government closed. So it just seems like everywhere you turn, there's a dead end at this point.
Alex, House Republicans, are they more inclined, less inclined, similarly uninclined to make any deal heading into their next election? As they look at their next elections, do they see it helping or hurting, helping them in the long run as 2014 looks, this shutdown now?
Well, it doesn't look like they're changing at all. It doesn't sound like they're changing their tunes at all. They think that politically it makes more sense for them to dig in than to back out. And frankly, it sort of seems like the longer this goes on, the less incentive there is for them to back out. They don't want to look like they're somehow changing positions or softening up in the eyes of their base. So the longer this goes on, one has to wonder, when will this end?
And David, does this have, this is ostensibly about Obamacare funding, even though it seems like as the week has gone on, we've heard about healthcare less and less from both Democrats and Republicans on the Hill as they try to make it about NIH funding or national parks funding or anything else other than sort of what started this whole dog and pony show off in the first place. Does the shutdown have any real impact on Obamacare starting, on the Obamacare launch, beyond sort of the press people who are in charge of publicizing it being furloughed?
Yeah, exactly. Like poor Jessica Santillo. The irony of all this is that, for the launch of Obamacare, it gets its funding through other sources. It's not really affected by the shutdown, so it went ahead. I mean, there are probably some effects on the margins. Like, I was talking to a guy in Florida who's helping to sign up uninsured people, and he's dealing with the same glitchy website. He can't get past the third screen, and he's trying to call the person who writes their contracts for HHS, and they're on furlough. So he can't find anybody to answer his questions and help out. But in the larger picture, no, it's going ahead. Really, most of the problems that we're seeing right now don't seem to be directly caused by the shutdown. They're more caused by not having enough time to put the website together, and maybe they could have done a better job with the time they had.
Is there an end in sight to this? Is there sort of a map to show us sort of from 2 years ago when they played debt limit, Russian roulette over the debt limit? Are there lessons from that, or are there other sort of ways to sort of predict how this is going to end?
No, I mean, I think the best prediction anybody has right now is just that they continue to Republicans continue to try ways to splinter or to make statements through legislation on the floor. I think they're going to move away from the pure Obamacare argument to trying to goad the president into entering into a fiscal negotiation over debt and deficit issues. And the president will continue to say, I'm not going to negotiate with you until you open the government and raise the debt limit. And the Republicans will feel as though they can, sully the president because, is that the right word? Might be, might not be. Sully, is that the right word? Okay. Sully the president, who's saying, I'm not going to negotiate on fiscal issues now, and making him look intractable. That's certainly what they're going to be trying to do, I think, in the next week. And the president will continue to say, I'm not going to negotiate. And so then you just see it going into another week. And then, it's already to the point where people are saying, we're not going to go through this with the debt limit a week out. The debt limit expires in 2 weeks now. And the White House is trying to really hit the message that, even in the lead up to the debt limit, it's going to be very damaging if there's this uncertainty. So I think the only roadmap at this point is just the October 17th end date for the debt limit. There's no roadmap in this situation because this is so different from the past negotiations. Nobody's talking to each other. Literally, there's aides, very cosmetic conversations happening among the principals, but there's really not. So it's hard to see how this breaks.
Is there any reason for optimism that this won't be sort of an 11th hour?
In fact, I actually, no, I don't think there is. We heard from somebody today who pointed out that Boehner could very well bring this, have this play out through the 11th hour, and that would fit with his historical pattern of how he's dealt with these things, because he's in a very precarious position and he needs to show his members that his only option is to do a certain thing, and that usually involves taking it down to the wire.
And Alex, there's no real, for the sort of 50 or 60 or however many House Republicans that are sort of the defund and delay caucus. Do they see, what's the usefulness to them of keeping the government shut down and getting closer and closer to a debt default? What's the usefulness to those guys? Is there any argument do they get any flack, the ones who are in sort of 25 and 30 and 35% Obama districts? Are they hurt at all by this, or because they're seen as standing up to the president, that only helps them at home?
For right now, at least, they don't think that they are. They don't think that there doesn't seem to be a lot of pressure on them, at least not yet. Now, the question is as this goes on, they start getting more and more calls from their constituents saying you need to end this thing? Maybe that's what sort of turns the tide here. But to some extent, one has to wonder if this is up to John Boehner just at some point bring a bill to the floor, even if it relies mostly on Democratic votes. I mean, that's how they passed a fiscal cliff deal really early this year. Now, obviously, that's sort of Boehner has that one bullet in his chamber, and he doesn't want to use it necessarily, but one has to wonder if he feels like he might just have to at some point.
You wrote a story earlier this summer about Democrats almost being giddy about the prospect of a shutdown, thinking that it would help them in 2014. Is that still the case now that we're in it?
Look, there was nothing going for Democrats until this week. There was absolutely nothing going for them. You look at historical precedents, it almost always, you can actually make that generalization, goes against the party. The midterm of election of a president in his 6 year in office almost always goes against the party in power. And this has created a dynamic where Democrats can use this message that they've been hitting on for months, even years now, that Republicans are this party of extremism, and take that sort of theoretical argument and make it much more concrete, where they can say, look, this extremism is really hurting people's lives in a very specific way. And so Democrats think their argument is strengthened now.
Let's move on to Obamacare. As we mentioned earlier, David wrote a book about Obamacare called Understanding Obamacare, which you should all download from Politico.com right this minute. Sort of the grand, unabridged history of Obamacare. And as you said, there's been the predictable glitches this week. Even some of the people standing behind the president at his Rose Garden event on Tuesday had trouble signing up for health insurance.
Reed, the intrepid
That's
reporter,
right.
found that out.
Great story by Reed Epstein.
And the White House, of course, has made the very predictable argument that the glitches are just a sign of their success, that it's so popular that too many people want to get involved, want to sign up, and so that's why no one seems to be able to sign up.
Yeah, they've really tried to turn it into as Kathleen Sebelius said the other day, this is a great problem to have.
But is it really a great problem
Maybe
to have?
for like one day.
Well,
like, you got to get your stuff together.
You know, if they really thought it was a great problem to have, they should probably read Ezra Klein's post this morning where he says this is a disaster. And
as Brendan Buck said, who is the speaker's spokesperson, when you lose Ezra Klein, Ezra Klein is a big defender of Obamacare, or just of. Right?
Yeah, exactly. He's one of one of the administration's biggest supporters on this. When you lose him, that's a problem. And reality is it's not just Ezra. I mean, this Florida navigator that I was talking to yesterday, the guy who's helping to sign up uninsured people, he says, I'm one of the biggest supporters of this program that there is. I was hoping to come out here today in front of the TV cameras and say, look at all these people who've been desperate for health insurance who got it today. He said, I couldn't give you anybody because we couldn't enroll anybody. So, it's true. They've got a while. They can sort through all this stuff. But really, most people are saying they've got to get this fixed by the end of October, or people are just going to get discouraged and give up.
And how much of this is them sort of doing stuff on the fly? 'Cause one thing that I found strange on Tuesday, when the president stood up in the Rose Garden, read out an 800 number for people to call if they couldn't get in the website, was that how many of these people who are going to be eligible for health care for the first time don't have internet access or don't have email addresses, don't have computers in the home, and the target audience is not necessarily the same people who are going to be either online or have dexterity online to get to healthcare.gov, even if it did work.
Well, that's right. The president has liked to compare this to buying plane tickets on Expedia or buying a flat screen TV online or something. But one of the exchange experts I talked to kind of said, well, yeah, it's sort of like buying a flat screen TV if you don't know any of the technology and, you get confused by high def versus whatever else. He said, a lot of the people that are going to be signing up have never dealt with the world of health insurance. Even if you have health insurance right now through the job, the terms will probably confuse most people because health insurance is complicated. So all these people are going to come to, even if they came to the websites, they'd be in for, one whale of an education about it. But you're right. I mean, a lot of these people are not going to have access to begin with. They can go to a lot of these navigator sites and people to help them sign up in person, but even they are going to need some access to the website to say, look, let me help you browse your health plans and let me show you what kind of choices you have. Right now, they can't even get that far into the federal website. Some states are doing better, but some states are having trouble too.
And are these navigators, are they 20-minute appointment and you make an appointment with someone to go and show you how this works?
Yeah. It sounds like they're making appointments, and in a lot of cases they're having to reschedule those appointments for next week or even later. These are outside groups that have been kind of signed up to help, like hospitals and community health centers, in some cases universities and charities. And, it's true that all these people do have time. And, as one of the consultants kind of said, if you're an impatient person, you probably shouldn't be trying to do this during the first week anyway. Maybe come back in a couple of weeks, and that's fine. But in a couple of weeks, they really need it to be working more consistently than it does now.
I think the White House and the administration has 6 months. They have 6 months to have an enrollment period. And I think that headlines are really bad for them now. I have to think that if they do work it out, even over the next few weeks, or, you would think the next few weeks, they have to get it operating well, but they have 6 months. So I think that's working to their benefit here.
Are they almost lucky that there's a shutdown and that there's something else is picking up all the oxygen, and that, because if the shutdown wasn't happening, every story, there would be much more attention focused on the rollout, right?
Exactly. That's why some of the Republican strategists who really think about this stuff are realizing that, they kind of emptied their 6 shooters into their foot, by doing this, because now this is not the focus of attention. They would have loved to have focused all their attention on Obamacare glitches, and they can't do it now. But I think Carrie's right that, if the bright side for them is if they do get this up and running well in the next month or so, it'll probably be forgotten, and then people will be coming back. They will be able to sign up.
Our last thing before we go to a break, there's been the war of words. It's Washington, so any political dispute will reach the lowest common denominator fairly quickly. An anonymous White House aide told the Wall Street Journal that the White House is winning the shutdown dispute, which prompted John Boehner to say this is not a damn game, which then President Obama had to, when he walked to a sandwich shop near the White House, he assured everyone that no one is winning in the shutdown battle. We had House Republican Martin Stutzman earlier this week wax poetic about not being shown the proper respect, whatever that means. What's, why? I mean, I guess it's not surprising that it reached sort of this kind of level, but what's the advantage, or what do these guys see as the advantage of sort of going sort of lower and lower and lower on this sort of thing?
Lower?
Just sort of making it as childish as it can get, sort of as fast as possible.
Well, we'll see how childish things get next week as both sides dig in even more. This is, and we've said there's no end in sight here. There is no end in sight here, and we'll see what happens over the weekend. They're going to have a couple of votes apparently, but the mud is just beginning to fly, so to speak.
So it'll get worse before it gets better.
It's already gotten pretty bad, to be honest with you, and I think it's maybe reaching a boiling point. I think it has to get it's going to get a little bit worse rhetorically, but if you listen to Harry Reid this week, I mean, he's saying some out there stuff about, Republicans, and you have John Boehner raising his voice, and you just have people, it just seems to have gotten a little bit out of control, and I think it's probably going to rise a couple more levels, and then something's going to have to break, because I think that everyone's looking a little sullied, as I said earlier.
It would be a good time for them to cool off for the weekend.
Yeah, I think they need to cool off. I do.
And speaking of cooling off, we're going to take a quick break for some programming notes. We'll be right back with more from our team in our highlights round.
Hey, podcast listeners, plethora of events for you next week. We just announced a playbook breakfast on Monday morning with Jason Furman and Gene Sperling. Jason Furman is the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and Gene Sperling, the director of the National Economic Council. Monday morning at 8 a.m. Check out politico.com/events for all of these. On Tuesday, we have Cyber 7, the 7 key questions driving the cybersecurity agenda. That is at 8 a.m. as well. We'll stream live at politico.com/livestream. And on October 11th, we have our continuing series, Women Rule. This one is empowering entrepreneurs. That's Friday, October 11th at noon. And that will live stream at politico.com/livestream. And for more information about the Women Rule series, check out politico.com/events. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Scrum. I'm Reed Epstein here with Carrie Budoff-Brown, Alex Eisenstadt, and David Nather from Politico. It's time for our highlights round. We're going to touch on a couple of big moments from the week, and I'll ask for your quick takes. Here we go. We saw on Thursday Wendy Davis, the Texas state senator who vaulted into national prominence with her filibuster this summer on abortion rights, announced she's running for governor in Texas. Is this a thing that we should care about, or is she just another Democrat that's going to be doomed to statewide defeat in Texas?
She got a lot of attention. She's great for Democrats to raise money off of. But can she actually win in Texas statewide, running against a pretty popular Republican? We'll see.
So you'd fall into not a thing category as opposed to
well, not quite, but I'm not quite there that it is a thing.
Okay, so it's like half a thing.
It's sort of like almost. It's on the threshold, It's sort of dancing there.
Is she somebody who sort of is? Can she wrap into? I know that the president and the White House have worked to do a lot of healthcare outreach in Texas, and Jen Haberkorn has been there for us. Is there any sort of overlap between what Wendy Davis, sort of the Wendy Davis movement, and the healthcare outreach, and the sort of the efforts to get those people signed up and get them on board with a Democratic candidate for governor?
Well, I will say this. It seems that Wendy Davis is the biggest star the Texas Democrats have had since Ann Richards. There are pretty big differences. I mean, I covered Ann Richards. She was out there with spewing the funny stuff every other sentence. Wendy Davis is not like that. If you read the Texas Monthly profile of her, that came out this week, they kind of have this long paragraph quote from her where she's spouting all this wonky stuff, and at the end she kind of says, "Oh, I guess I wasn't very quotable, huh?" I mean, she's kind of, everybody knows her because of the abortion filibuster, but she's really kind of been thrust into this. Now that she's there, though, if she spends a lot of time talking up Obamacare and sign up and so forth, it could help. It could help somewhat. It'll get the progressives in Texas a lot farther than they are now.
Carrie, is Wendy Davis a thing or not a thing?
I think we need to wait to see how she does on the campaign trail.
It's a very very political answer.
Very restrained.
So our second, then we'll close the show before we go to our shout-outs round with predictions. The government's shut down. The debt limit is going to be reached on October 17th, according to the Treasury Department. What's the date in which we'll have a budget deal that opens the government back up and sends people back to work?
So I have to go first.
Well,
Thank you.
How
about this?
Well,
I'll take. No,
you were the last one in,
okay.
so you get to go first.
About a week from today, week from Friday, because members want to go home for the weekend.
So
that would be October. You're down for October 11th.
October 11th. They want to go home for the weekend. Maybe it's October 10th. Make it a 3-day weekend.
No, they're off the week of Columbus Day week, which is the 14th. So they have a recess, a week-long recess that starts technically next Friday, and
October 11th.
And so you can see the incentive there for them to get something done before then. If not, I predict October 15th, and I say that because that's a Tuesday, and usually all deals are made right before the Senate luncheons on Tuesday and announced afterwards.
But don't get between a member and the recess.
That's true. So I think that may win out better than the Tuesday rule.
Right.
Or October 17th. But.
Well, I'm actually going to have to go with a Thursday because
which Thursday?
The 17th.
So all the way down
that
to the
day,
wire.
and specifically 5 o'clock. Why? Because that seems to be the rhythm of most congressional weeks. Sometimes when things are going better, maybe the Tuesday thing, but when things are going badly, it's the last minute. 5 o'clock Thursday.
So we have the 10th, the 15th, and 17th. So we'll come back in a couple weeks and see how good those predictions are. We'll hold you to them. We'll go to our shout-outs round. Alex.
Okay, this is easy.
Let's hear something you read, something you watched, a place you ate this week.
This is easy. Captain Phillips, DC premiere. It's coming out it's coming out October 11th. Amazing movie, edge of your seat excitement. It's fantastic. Everyone should see it.
David.
I'll just give a shout out to the 3rd season of Sherlock whenever that shows up.
And Carrie.
I would give a shout out to Homeland. I enjoyed the first episode this past week. I'm pretty psyched for the 3rd season.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure about the.
I liked it. It's fun.
It's fun. The 2nd season was a little weak.
I loved it. I'm down with it.
We'll have to see what happens with Congressman Brody, where he's hiding out.
No. I was a little. I actually, you know what? The preview of the season actually kind of bothered me.
A little bit.
Did you? You know, a little bit. You think it's going to be predictable, but you know what? I bet it's not. You looked at the right? Do you think so?
Absolutely.
I'm going to give a shout out to an anonymous person. I don't know. New York Times photographer Doug Mills took a photograph during the Capitol, the shooting event outside the Capitol on Thursday, where there was a police sniper wedged over almost a balcony, and behind him was a Hill staffer in a suit checking his BlackBerry as he walked right through what was about to be an international crime scene, totally oblivious to everything that was going on.
Tells you everything you need to know about Washington.
Everything you need to know about Washington in one black and white photo. Carrie, Alex, David, thanks for coming on the Scrum. If you want even more from these stories, head to Politico.com. You can find us on the podcast at Politico.com/podcast. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Search for Politico Podcasts. I'm Reed Epstein. That's the Scrum. Thanks again for listening this week.